This is the Michael Bryan Show. Hi everyone, welcome back to the show, and today I am joined with Dr. Trina Read, who's a best-selling, award-winning author. She's also a sexologist and long-time educator whose work has helped women and couples create intimate relationships that feel honest, confident, and deeply connected. So we are talking intimacy, building long-term relationships, and how to get the most out of them as well. Dr. Trina, thanks so much for taking the time and joining me today.
Oh, I'm so thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
I thought we would start with how you got started. What drew you to essentially relationships and trying to build them appropriately or correctly?
Well, interestingly enough, I am from the middle part of Canada, and the university that I went to, and this was like back in the Stone Ages, like 1988 and 1989, when I first started university, there weren't any courses available for people like me. Like there was just, and especially at a smaller university, there was just nothing there. So I took what was available, and I actually got two undergraduate degrees. One was in business. And so I set off into the corporate world, into corporate Canada, and I lived in corporate Canada for about 10 years, completely unhappy. It just was not a good fit. But when that's your only option, that's what you take. And so, come the mid 90s, I don't know if you remember, Michael, there were these sex toy parties. And I was like, oh, those sound really interesting. So I decided to become a consultant. And, when I would go and do these parties, women were there and they were asking questions. And it was pretty clear that, there was a lot of misinformation or absolutely zero information. So here's just picture this, a room full of women who are all married, well, mostly married, and they don't know anything. And I was just like, how can this possibly be? So that got me interested. And a couple years into that, and this is my Genesis story, Michael. And I wish I had a more interesting Genesis story, but it's not. So I was on a dog walk with this really good-looking guy, and and we started talking about sex, as you do. And he was this very no nonsense guy. And he looked over at me and he said, you should be teaching this stuff. The light bulb just went on over my head. It's like, yes, I should be teaching this, because it just was like, yes, of course, that makes so much sense. And, in short order, I quit my lucrative corporate Canada job. And you can just imagine how thrilled my parents were about that. And I applied to this graduate school in San Francisco, and I had no business getting into that school because my background was business. But I got into the school, and I also was able to secure, my dream job, which was to be a trainer. So I worked as a trainer, putting myself through graduate school. And, at the time I was pretty naive, and I just believed that the stars aligned, and, the universe opened up, and, like everything was coming, and in a way it was true. I mean, I got this great job and I got into graduate school, and, that was 25 years ago. And uh, had I known just what this occupation would it be and entail, it's a good thing I didn't know what I didn't know, because it's been, I've been advocating for women for 25 years, and honest to goodness, Michael, it's been like pushing water up a hill every single day, getting up and just, like I'm sitting in my own little corner beating a drum. And so it's been rewarding in a lot of ways, and it's also been a super big challenge in a lot of ways. But when I was just in that newbie state of, oh, like, this is wonderful, it really was wonderful.
So when you were in this room full of women that essentially didn't necessarily know what they were doing. I mean, I'm often picturing the. Have you heard of the film What Women Want, where the guy could read women's minds,
Yeah.
and it just made me think if that was the situation, in theory, all he'd be hearing is, I don't know. I don't know what I want. I'm a little bit clueless, to be honest. Is that not a little bit counterintuitive to what we might think? So, like, everyone is on the journey together, so to speak, trying to find what works, what they like, what they don't like. Is it like a mutual thing where you end up discovering things together?
There's a few things that I've figured out over 25 years, and that is there there there's two big reasons why couples in long-term relationships don't have the intimacy that they want or desire. And the number one reason is the average woman in the average relationship doesn't know how to ask for what she wants or that she wants something different. So women in general, and I don't want to get into the, men are bad or women like it's nothing. Like I truly believe that everybody's doing the very best that they can do with what they know. So, we have, women who don't feel like she can ask for something different in the bedroom. And then on the other side of this, we have her partner, and her partner is saying, "Hey, let me know. I want to know. Tell me what's going on." And she is incapable of saying that. And so that is, honest to goodness, that's the biggest sticking point to couples moving forward with being able to experience what they should be experiencing. And the second thing that holds couples back is, even if a woman wants to and starts to ask for what she wants, the majority of women are unable to lean into her pleasure. So, I think it's just assumed that, like, when you're in the throes of things and you're all juiced up, women are just going to lay back and but women have been socialized and trained for her entire life to push pleasure away. So we're like, we don't want to get pregnant. We don't want to get an STI. We don't want to be called a slut. We don't want to be seen as promiscuous. We have been conditioned to push pleasure away. And suddenly, we're in this relationship and we have to lean back. And when I was writing my book, You Me, my award-winning book, I always have to throw that one in there. My award-winning book, You Me Bed Now, I went researching for, how women can lean into her pleasure. And I was Googling stuff and, millions and millions of articles and blogs and YouTubes, like millions of hits were about how to give women an O. There was nothing there about how women could, lean back and enjoy what was given to her. And there's just been like, so there's this huge, huge gap of women not understanding how to relax in her body and enjoy just what's going on. And so there's this inability to communicate with her partner, and she's got this going on, and on the other side of her partner is wanting to know this information. So, like, all of these things are going on. And a couple can be together for 25, 30, 40, 50 years and share their body, but never once share their words. So, there's a lot going on, and so when we look at, how do we figure this out, it's really not a straight line. It's very nuanced, but but I would say with these women, when they're like, I love here's the biggest thing that we hear. Like, this is what I would hear at these sex toy parties is, I love my partner and I want to stay together with them. We had this fantastic relationship. I'm just not interested in sex. I'm just not interested. So how do I get the interest back? And that's like the $1 million question, but it's all tied into this inability to ask for what she wants, inability to lean into her pleasure, inability to communicate with her partner. And, like, I hope this makes sense to you, Michael. It's a very long answer for your very short question.
It actually makes me think about how we can overcome the condition, and it sounds like it could be a thing in between couples, whether we're ever going to truly know for sure, or whether there is a way of overcoming the conditioning.
Well, so there's, hundreds, thousands of me now. Like when I was first doing this 20 years ago and I got out of graduate school, there were only a few of me's and so there wasn't a lot of people going out and giving education. And now I think that has turned and you go onto Instagram and you can't swing a cat without hitting somebody like me on there. And I do find that this younger generation, like 35 and under, they're a lot more sophisticated with this, with their languaging and, being able to communicate. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's certainly better than what we had. But that group of people that are 35 and over, we're still stuck in this socialization of, you can't talk about it. When you talk about it, there's a lot of shame attached, so I think things are changing. People on not necessarily doing what I do, but they're for example, they're perimenopause or menopause experts. And so they're talking to women about, the changes that you go through, your body goes through when you are in perimenopause and menopause. And, it in doing so, it touches on, teaching women about their bodies in a very indirect way. So, I mean, there's a lot of education out there now for these plus 35 people, and a lot more social acceptance. And here's another thing that I think is a big part of this socialization. So when I started doing this, I did it, I've done at least, well, more than over 1,000 interviews all over the world, on TV and radio, and, I cut my teeth on being super PG and, because you can't talk about sex on TV or on radio, you have to talk around it. But something started becoming like, what, 5, 10 years into doing these types of interviews, something became very clear to me, which was I could talk about anything sex negative. So, I could talk about sexual dysfunction or sexual diseases, STIs, or, you're having a really difficult time with your partner and, sex therapy. But the moment that I started talking about female sexual pleasure, I got censored, and I still do. So that being censored for talking to women about her owning her pleasure consistently has been censored. So how that impacts just an average couple is, in the news, you're just getting negative stuff. Like you're just hearing the bad stuff about sex, all and the thing is, Michael, if you go and you start looking through headlines, you'll see that it's true. Like you're aware of it now. So you're like, oh my goodness, that's like, you won't, it's really like, maybe not on Instagram or on social media now because there are so many experts on, banging this drum. But if you go on to bigger outlets, you won't find too many positive things. And so couples and women especially, they're only presented with sex negative information. And it's virtually impossible to, lean into her pleasure when there's so much shame and anxiety and angst around, what the messaging of sex is.
That's a good point, actually, because I'd probably agree with you there that if you're only given negative information, would that not build some kind of negative association with it? And then coupled with, maybe guilt or maybe not necessarily embarrassment, but like, I suppose vulnerability would be the word, right? Where you're sharing things that maybe you've not shared before. All of those things wrapped up together would probably make things very, very difficult.
Yeah, it's, it is incredibly difficult, as you say, to let your guard down. And being vulnerable with a person is probably one of our most difficult things, just to say to them, this is something I'd like to try. I get it. So I talk about sex every day, and talking about sex is like talking about credit cards. Like it's like talking about the weather. It just has no, like I have no emotional triggers from it. Like, but I understand the moment an average person starts talking about sex and saying, "Hey, I'd like to try something different," it brings up all this messy, tricky, things that are happening inside your body, and like you're opening up and you're being vulnerable, and you just don't want this person to reject you or to reject what you want to do. So people just don't say anything. But the problem is, if you choose to be with somebody for over the long term, sex is an evolution. And just like our life is an evolution, like sex does not stay static. It's forever changing, especially if you choose to do things like have kids. When you have kids, for those people listening who have kids, you know that, when the goalposts are constantly changing, like you figure things out and then it changes. And so there's this constant shifting dynamic. And even if you don't have kids, there's this constant shifting dynamic. And, in that shifting dynamic, you need to communicate. And if you don't, that's where couples find themselves in, in a sexless marriage, or being in a sexless relationship, or being very resentful at each other because one's not happy, or like they're both not happy. And all of this can be fixed relatively straightforward with just having a few conversations. But the emotional angst around having those conversations are just so great that the people would rather feel the resentment, or maybe even separate, because as you know, the two biggest factors for people splitting up is money and sex.
So, if that's the case, what do you think stops people from having one difficult conversation over 5 or 10 easy ones, given that they're more likely to separate if they don't discuss it? Like, is it just they cross a line where they would rather separate than have the conversation? The fear of rejection or not liking the discussion is worse than separating?
Well, I think when you get to a point in a relationship where it's a sexless relationship, or there's all that resentment, I mean, there's a lot of other things happening, and they're tangled up with the sex. So, and it's really about untangling. It's the whole, you see your partner squeezing the toothpaste wrong, and you burst out into a fight. It's not the toothpaste. It's all the other things that are happening in your relationship that you're, exploding about. So it's not this. So in the same way, it's not the sex. The sex gets tangled in all these other relationship issues. And so in those situations, the majority of people, including myself, are unable to untangle those on our own. Like we think there's so much shame about going to see a counselor or a therapist that we try and like put our head down and just like work through these issues. But honestly, it's just so much easier and faster, and just everything's more economical when you just go to a therapist and counselor and sort this out, because um, you know you can say things to a third person mediator, like a counselor or a therapist, that you just like you can't say to your partner. But as far as communicating goes, I think the best way to start a conversation. So if you're not at that place where you're on the edge of losing your relationship, like so that's that you need to go to the professionals and just have that professional help you sort that mess out. But if you're just in a place where you love each other and you want things to work out, you just aren't really satisfied with the way things are going, there are there are hundreds and thousands of us who produce educational information. And so, you and your partner can, put on a YouTube and watch it together. And then that's the start of the conversation. So you don't actually have to like, sit your partner down across from you and say, okay, we need to talk about our sex life. You can let the experts do the heavy lifting. Like we'll talk about it for you. And then you can just, as a couple, can figure this out, you know, you know, and that or you can send your partner, a blog or an article, let them read them, and then, have that kind of conversation. But, I think the ability to talk about things is so much easier than it was even 10 years ago because there's so much information, good information out there where, you just are like, okay, so, I'm not happy in my relationship about this. You just Google it and, somebody's article or YouTuber or Substack pops up and then you're like, okay, that sounds good. I'm going to share this with my partner and and that's the genesis of the conversation. But so the thing is, with talking about sex, it's the first conversation and the second is it's not going to be easy and it's not going to be fun. You're going to feel super awkward, and it's really, honest to goodness, it's just really about leaning into the awkwardness. And just like it's like, just put your head down and say, okay, this conversation is going to be a mess. We're going to do it anyways, and you're going to make it through it, and you're not going to die. You're going to be just fine. And the thing is, when you make it through that first conversation, and it is a hot mess, and it's bringing up all these emotions, the second conversation is going to be a little easier. And then the third and fourth and fifth conversation are going to be even more easier. And honest to goodness, you're going to get to a point where, if you just keep up this, if you just like check in like once a month with each other, you're going to get to a point where, you can sit across from each other at the breakfast table, drinking your coffee, saying, hey, let's talk about our sex life. It just, it does get easier and better. And when you get to that place, instead of sex being a negative trigger for you, sex becomes a positive trigger. It's like, oh, let's do this or let's try this or, and suddenly you get excited about being with your partner again. And that's what it's all about.
That leads on to the rest, right? Like usually couples will be happier because they've had these conversations, and as a consequence, everything's better or everything's heightened, everything's exciting again. And it's because you've gone through it. It's because you've had these conversations initially.
Yeah, so two famous sex therapists, and I'm their names just blanking. I'm sorry to you. I'm not citing you properly, but they wrote a wonderful book, and they said, when sex is going well in a relationship, it adds about 10 to 15% to the couple's happiness and fulfillment. However, when sex is not going well, when it's resentful or non-existent, it saps the vitality of that couple 75 to 80%. So, and I think that's, I when I look at, relationships in general, when things are going along really well, like, you're in a good place with your partner and, you see each other and you're enjoying your relationship. It's not that we take it for granted, but we take it for granted. It's not until things start going sideways or wrong that we start paying attention to things. And so, like that ability to connect with your partner, it's adding, but it's adding, but not substantially. I think maybe people think that, it's like when you have regular intimacy, like it's going to be like 50 or 60, it's adding 50 or 60%, but it's really just 10 to 15%. But when you're not connecting with your partner inside or outside the bedroom, it's depleting your relationship significantly. And I think what's really frustrating is, once you're at that place where sex is depleting your relationship, it feels so difficult to get back just to neutral. Just, like yeah, I just want to get back to neutral. And it does take a lot of heavy lifting, and people get really discouraged by that. So, but I do feel like when you do make the efforts, when you do have the conversations, and you do start having where it's adding to the vitality of your relationship. Like you know, it, um, it takes you, if you decide to spend, 50 years with one person, this is one of those things that is the glue that holds you together as a couple. And it's you and your partner and your relationship. It's worth the effort and time that it takes to make this work.
Oh, I completely agree with that. And then sometimes, if we don't know what it takes to get to neutral, to get to some kind of baseline, you feel like you don't know how to get to that point. And you mentioned connection as well, and that's kind of where there are, I suppose, inside the bedroom and then outside the bedroom when all of this can matter. So, what would you say were the best things that people can do to connect and to initiate the excitement again? Because if bedroom things only add about 15%, but not doing it sounds like we'd want to try to do this day to day. 24/7, trying to do little things that make things exciting again. What can we do?
Yeah, so you're exactly on the nose, Michael. Well done, you. So, I just find that if you are in a place where things are weird in the bedroom, trying to force the issue is just going to blow up in your face. And so I would say that it's this is the point where you focus on connecting outside the bedroom. So a lot of couples, including myself, we take our, the day to day connecting with our partner, we just don't think about it. Like there's so much going on, we've got like there's life goes on, and we just feel like our partner's always going to be there. And, but like, if you're at that place, and even if you're not at that place, but, a very good couple habit to get into is to appreciate uh, and be kind to your partner every day. And I mean, it sounds so cliche, but um, it, it makes such a huge impact. So, just saying something kind to your partner, go like it's really about intention, right? So you're intentionally setting, saying to yourself, today I'm going to do something kind to my partner, for my partner, like getting them a cup of coffee in the morning, or saying something kind to them, or sending them a funny text, however you do your relationship. And, mixed in with that, I feel like when you've been in a relationship for a long time, you stop craving your partner. So, one of the reasons our relationships are so magical at the start is we are constantly craving our partner. We're desiring them, or like, like we just start like we can't wait to see them. We can't wait to compliment them. We're showing them how much we want to be around them. And I find that desire for our partner stops somewhere in the long-term relationship. So, like, intentionally being kind to your partner, and then once in a while, like throwing in, hey, I think you're hot. Hey, I think you're whatever you want to say. I am not good at flirty sexting. Like I'm just terrible at it. So don't take my words for it. Just go on ChatGPT, ask for some suggestions. But I'm just saying, just starting to really crave your partner, like when you see them, give them a squeeze, or give them a whistle, or show them that you crave them and you desire them, and suddenly that's going to wake up a different side of them. But unfortunately for many women, They feel that as soon as her partner touches her, it's going to lead to the bedroom. And so she freezes up. So, I mean, there has to be like this conversation outside the bedroom to say, hey, you know what? We can just desire each other. We can, play and touch and hug and kiss and, do all these tactile things that really start revving up the juices. And it doesn't have to lead to intimacy. It doesn't have to lead to that. So I think, for women, we talked at the start of this about women learning to lean into her pleasure. And part of that is, outside the bedroom, she knows that, when her partner touches her, she can just lean into this touch and this kiss and this hug. And, like it's not going to go anywhere. And that's part of helping her, you know, really appreciate what her partner's doing for her in that moment.
I like what you said there in terms of like if it happens without it needing to lead to anything, then it gives them the chance to fully experience it. Is that to do with what they've had in the past then? Is that like a past experiences have taught them X and we need to find a way of helping them understand that it's not always going to be X and it gives them the chance to fully experience it, sit with it, because there's then not many expectations attached to that.
Yeah, so couples, they generally don't know how to initiate. So they're, uh, so generally research shows that the majority of men initiate and women do not. So women are, waiting for her partner to do something. Um, and because of that, a lot of the way, not all men, but generally men like to initiate is very tactile. Like they grab her butt. And as soon as she feels that initiation, he's tactile. But generally speaking, women who are in long-term relationship experience what's called a delayed sexual response. And what that simply means is when sex is initiated, she will not want to have sex in that moment. And in fact, it's going to take her a minute to move from her brain and into her body. So, like this is probably not the first time you've heard this, but women live inside their heads, and it's really difficult for women to unconnect. So women generally cannot compartmentalize sex. Like it just doesn't, men can, women cannot compartmentalize sex. So women are inside their head and her partner initiates and her first thought is, I not now. I don't feel like it now. Because and so she's sitting there and she when you're inside your head like that, you can't really feel your body. So her partner's doing all these things to try and get her in the mood and all these things and it's just not working and she's just like I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. So the thing about doing something every single day to your partner with your partner, being kind and showing them desire and, having this, I'm going to come and, hug you and kiss you and, do all these things and tactile. It's helping set up this delayed sexual response for, like it's going to make that time that it takes for her brain to move into her body, doing all that stuff outside the bedroom without any expectation is going to shorten that delayed sexual response so that, when you do walk into the bedroom, she knows that it's going to take, 5, 10 minutes for her brain to like switch over. But it makes it so much easier for her to just be able to get into the sexual experience faster and easier. I hope this makes sense.
It does make sense, and then I guess in some ways it just helps them be comfortable to do that because there's no expectation that it has to happen then and there. But then on the flip side, I guess the guy in the situation's trying all these things, and from the outset, it looks like they're not really having the effect that they're wanting. And then the guy's just kind of sat there, stood there, wondering what he has to do to get that sort of response from the woman in some ways. Because from the outside, nothing's happening.
Well, there is things happening, but it's called a delayed sexual response. And I would just say, if you're a guy, to understand that women take a long time just to get herself in a good space, right? So, you've probably heard, it takes men about, 3 to 5 minutes to and it takes women about 15 to 20 minutes to and so which is and so many men understand that they have to get her warmed up, but part of that getting her warmed up is she's actively having to move from her head and into her body. And like, having done, I've been married for almost 24 years, and I have a delayed sexual response. And so my experience of it is, my husband is, my husband and I are starting things, and in my head I'm like, I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. Nope, not there yet. Nope, nope. And I want to be present and enjoying this. Like I do. I like the but my head is saying, nope, not there, not there. And then suddenly it's like a light switch is turned on. It's like, oh, I'm there. Hot dog. I am here finally. And then I'm starting to enjoy what's happening. But for that, so I would just say, if you're a guy, it's going to take a moment. And so it's just about working with this and just keep going and trying. And she's obviously got to do some things too, but that's the experience of a delayed sexual response. It's like, nope, nope. And speaking for myself, it's not that I don't feel things on my body. It's just like, I'm like, the experience that my husband wants me to have, I'm not having that experience. Because like my body's just, it's almost like it's shut down.
I mean, it must feel quite strange to have the switch not happen yet. Like you're doing your thing, everything seems to be going well in air quotes, and then the lights come on and all of a sudden it feels very different. Like, it must feel quite strange for a woman to have that. And then, the fact that the guys tend to max out at 5 minutes ish, that means that by the time you're ready, it could be over.
That's generally how it goes, Michael. It's like you've just summarized the entire experience. But yes, that's generally how it goes. And so women, they aren't able to communicate to their partner that they have this delayed sexual response, and their partner's doing their best, and but it's like, well, you're, like, and a lot of women say, well, I'm not going to get there tonight, so you just go ahead, right? And if she keeps saying that over and over again, you know, when it comes time to have intimacy, she's like, well, it's all about my partner. It's not about me. And, even though he's trying so hard to make it about her, and having this, it's just so cringy having this, I have delayed sexual response. It is a cringy conversation, but an absolutely necessary conversation. And like I said, you can go on to my YouTube and I talk about it extensively, and this is how you can bring it up with your partner.
I suppose in some ways there be certain things that can make a difference. Is it personal from woman to woman? Is it general in some ways? What kinds of things can we do, whether intimacy in the bedroom, out the bedroom, just to help with this, just to help it not just be about the guy, because by which time she's already accepted that it's not happening by then, and it just doesn't work. It kind of falls flat. What are some of the things that we can do to help with that?
I just start, for women, is to really get back in touch with her body. And it's it's just about, and I know this is a woo-woo word, but it's really about being present in your body. So, like when you think about your five sensations, there's hearing and touch and taste and smell and feeling. So when you sit down to eat some food, you're really tasting your food. You're starting to, like, instead of just mechanically eating, you're just being present with it. When you take a shower, you're really feeling that shower on your body, and the water dripping off. When you maybe light a candle, you're really smelling that candle. So I think it's just for women, it's just getting back. Like the start of this is just getting back into her body and starting to pay attention to her body's cues. And, when she starts to do that, it's so much easier for her to feel when her partner does nice things to her, so instead of pushing that, like freezing up and pushing that good feel away, she's like, oh, just feels really nice, and that's the start of it. And depending where you are with, your relationship, there are so many tools available to you to help you both reconnect with your bodies individually, but also as a couple. Like it's called the Melba app. It's MELBA app. And so you as a couple go onto the Melba app and you type in what you prefer, what you like to do, like if you're vanilla or kink, whatever floats your boat, you type in what you like to do as a couple. And then the Melba app gives you suggestions on how things that you can try and do in your bedroom. And so one person lays down on the bed and the other person puts in earphones, and the Melba app guides you step by step on how to do a certain thing. So if you've always wanted to try to do something, or you want to do something new with your partner, but you don't know how to bring it up or what to do or how to do it, that's the majority of couples, is they just don't know how to do it. The Melba app like walks you through it. And so if you want to give an erotic massage, and you're kind of like, it sounds sexy and you want to try it, and the Melba app takes you through it all. And then, you can switch and you can do the other partner can listen to and do the other partner. So I'm just saying, there are a lot of tools like the Melba app where you can start engaging with each other on a more sensual and erotic way that is, it makes it easy for you to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, especially if you're trying to do something for the first time and
Hmm.
maybe your partner's like, we could try it. And then inside your own head, you're thinking, well, how do I go about
Yeah.
this now? It's
Yeah.
a
No,
really good way of bridging that gap.
it's really good. And not to give myself a plug here, but if you are interested in the Melba app, you can go on to my website. And under products, there's a whole, like I've done a video on it, and you can like, and there's a sales page for not that I sell the web, but there's a landing page for the Melba app. So if you go to trinaread.com, you can look that up.
Are there any other go-to things for intimacy? So I like the idea of using your senses and maybe picking a different one each time just to see what the effect might be. What other things are important? I would hate to leave any stone unturned, Trina. So what kind of things should we be trying?
So everybody listening, including you, Michael, you're going to hate this suggestion. Are you ready?
I
You're
am
gonna,
ready, yeah.
you're gonna hate this. So I would say if you want to have a successful sex life, you need to schedule it. So there's been much research over the years to prove that couples who schedule sex have better sex more often. And there's a good reason for that. And it's because there's a real intentionality to, what, I am carving out some time for you, for us to be close. And I just find that when you know that it's going to happen, that whole, we talked about delayed sexual response. So, like, it helps women wrap her mind around this idea that I know that it's going to happen. So I can go off and start getting into my body before that takes place. And I also find that when couples start planning sex, they can start bringing more interesting things in. So like the average couple, the reason the average couple gets into a sex rut is sex is initiated. You walk into the bedroom and you're like, what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. So you do the thing that you've always done and you do that over and over and over and over again. And so couples, it's okay. It just becomes boring that you keep doing the same thing over and over again. So when you start scheduling sex, you can say, well, maybe this time around we can try the Melba app, or we can try this tip that we got it on a YouTube channel. You start opening up this idea of okay, so we know that this is going to happen, so let's make it a lot more interesting. So I just feel like for whatever reason, plan is a four-letter word for couples. They just, they want this part of their life to be spontaneous. But I just find that when you say, and you don't have to say Tuesday at 3 o'clock, it's going to happen and you've got it in your calendar. It can just be, you know what, if you know that Tuesdays you're both home from work and you're both in the house, Tuesdays is the day that it can happen. It doesn't have to be a certain time of the day. It's just we know that Tuesday is our day. And, and then you can start building fun things around that experience. And, I just find that when couples actually say, we want to make each other a priority. We want to make this part of our lives a priority. All those other things that we talked about, being able to communicate and, leaning into pleasure and starting to ask for different things that she might want. This becomes infinitely easier once you start to schedule and plan.
That's actually a really good point because, as you mentioned, with all of the things with the delayed sexual response and things of that nature, I guess, as you say, if it's in the diary, you can plan for it. It's like going to the gym in the morning. If you know that it's scheduled in, you'll get your bag ready the night before, you'll plan certain things around it to make it happen. So I can only see that being a benefit, especially when some things will take time to plan depending on what you intend on doing as well. So it's not always just, setting the bedroom up. There could be a bit more that you would have to do. And I can imagine that takes time as well in a lot of ways. So I can only see that being a positive.
For sure. And it's the warm up, right? So if you know that Tuesday is the day, you can start sending flirty texts. You can start craving each other, desiring, creating those erotic threads outside the bedroom. And the more erotic threads you have outside the bedroom, the more that whole moving into the bedroom becomes fun. And, you're anticipating it. And that, I find with long-term couples, that whole anticipation, it goes from something very positive to negatively anticipating sex. So, it's really when you start scheduling it out, it recreates that positive anticipation of, we're going to have fun, we're going to enjoy each other, we're going to feel close, like all the good things that come when you have that nice couple time.
Well, I really enjoy speaking with you, Dr. Trina. I think this is definitely a subject which most of us will need some extra help with. So for those that would like to learn more, possibly enter your world, how could they do that? So it was your chance to share websites and social media, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so you can go to my website, trinaread.com. I do have a Substack, and so all my social medias are under at Dr. Trina Read. My podcast and my Substack are The Pursuit of Pleasure.
Thanks so much for being a guest on the show. Those that are listening, feel free to subscribe, share the show, tell others, and also leave a review wherever you are listening into your podcasts. Trina, this has been great. I've enjoyed this, and I look forward to keeping in touch. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Michael.